Welcome to the Growth Room with David Daniels. Today, we're incredibly fortunate to have Ken Edmonds, the visionary CEO of 22nd Century Management. Ken, with his over 2 decades of business consultation leadership, is a lauded strategic growth partner and leadership multiplier. Today, we'll be diving into his unparalleled approach to leadership consultations and exploring the significant trends he's observing in the industry. Ken, it's a pleasure to have you. How are you today?
I am absolutely fine. Glad to be here.
Great, great. Can you share a little bit about your background and your role at 22nd Century Management?
Yep, I can do that. I have had a quite varied background. I did 10 years in the military back in the 60s and the 70s, which is where I got started in the IT side of business.
Nice.
I actually worked on ground-based computer systems for quite a while, then airborne computer systems. After that, I did a stint in a manufacturing plant for about a year and realized I was not cut out for manufacturing. That doing the same thing over and over again didn't work for me.
Right.
And that was about the time Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers. So I did a stint of 8 years with air traffic control. And I realized that I was going to kill somebody someday, and I did not want to do that. So
Right.
I made the mistake, and this is common entrepreneurial mistake, as I got out and I started a business I knew nothing about.
Nice.
I started doing remanufactured cartridges for the HP2s and HP1 printers. That gives you an idea how far back it was. And
Right.
that actually went pretty well. But then I kept trying to expand into other things, and pretty soon I was a copier dealer. And I'd never worked for a copier dealer, never been around a copier dealer, and I was trying to run a copier dealership. Not the easiest task. And one
Right.
of the things that made it more challenging is I didn't even realize how badly I needed outside advice. And we'll come back to that because I found a little bit of a solution for that.
Mhm.
But it was one of those things I just thought, well, I'll figure it out as I go.
Right.
And we were successful, grew to almost $1 million in sales. We sold the company, and then part of the reason we sold was is I realized I wasn't good at managing salespeople. I could manage technicians all day because I came out of a technical industry. That
Right.
was my background. I understood that. Sales was not something that I could do sales. I could walk down the street with a picture of a copy and sell copiers,
Right.
but I couldn't manage salespeople. So I said, okay, I got to get out of this. And I did a stint. The person I sold the company to, I worked for him for a year or so, and then I injured my back, and that was right before 2000. So everybody was worried about Y2K stuff. So I did a little bit of Y2K consulting and some software consulting. And I ran into an individual that was much smarter than I was because he needed the software that I wanted to install for him, but he realized that he could probably hire me to work for him and get me to install the software for less than he would pay me to install the software.
Right.
And so he was just a better businessman than I was, you know. And I went back into service management, and I did that for a variety of dealerships until I went to work for the manufacturer about 2002. Yeah, I guess it was 2002. I went to work for Sharp Electronics, and I was my title was district service manager. It was my job to help dealers get better. And it was really interesting because in that time frame, I got to see dealers in the office equipment space that were tremendously good and some that were so horribly bad it wasn't even funny. I actually went into one dealership and they had buckets. It was a converted old house and they had buckets all over catching the rainwater.
Wow.
And I am like, okay, it's just, and I saw some, I guess it's part of in that time frame, I saw some really good managers. I saw some average managers, and I saw some, pretty bad managers.
Right.
And so I started, Sharp was really nice to me, and they let me take any management training course that was related to the industry I could get my hands on. So I went to a lot of schools because I was able to run my territory fairly effectively. I had the time, so I went to schools and took all the management classes I could get because I could just see the advantage of understanding management better.
Right.
And one of the things that in the office equipment industry, and I think it's typical of a lot of industries, is what happens is they walk up to their best person in that job. So it might be their best salesperson, it might be best technician, might be the best person in the office, and they tell them they're a manager, and then they walk off and leave them.
Right. Right.
They don't give it, and they had tools to do whatever job they were doing for. Like, I'll use the example of a technician. They had the tools they needed to fix copiers, they had the knowledge to fix copiers.
Right.
But that doesn't translate into running a department, understanding how to be profitable and all these things.
No doubt.
So I did 10 years at Konica. I did about 8 years. I mean, 10 years at Sharp, about 8 years at Konica Minolta. And then I retired right before the pandemic.
Wow.
And one of the things I realized when I retired was is that retirement was not something for me. I have ADHD, and pretty soon I had a bunch of businesses running, and one of them was a business where I taught the process of or the skill, I guess you could say, maybe is a better word for it, of managing people, and applied it specifically to the copier industry. So I built a course out, and it started out. I went through all the basic stuff of what is management and what's the difference between management and supervision. We use those two terms interchangeably, but they're different.
Right.
And there's so many hats a manager has to wear: coaching and mentoring, and all of these things that he has to do. He's got to know customer service. And so we went through all of those areas, and I was a big fan. Some of my students weren't a big fan of it, but I was a big fan of having them read books.
Right.
And it was really funny. One of the gentlemen that was in my first class, and he's done very well since he came out of my class, he went from being the service manager to the vice president of the service. So he's done okay. But it was interesting that when he took the course, he was an athlete, and all he ever read was a sports section. And I gave him 3 books they had to read, and by the time he was done reading those books, he started a book club back at his company,
Nice.
because he learned so much from books.
Right.
And I'm a huge fan. The books I use for this course are things that I read early in my career. One of them is that I really love is The 1 Minute Manager.
Right.
Because very simplified management process, but if you apply it, and it applies even at home with your kids. I mean, it's just a different way of looking at how to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And then another one was Carl Sewell's Customers for Life.
Nice.
And in that book, he really drove home to me a concept that is incredibly valuable. And I would say that if everybody made this the theme of their way they dealt with customers, they'd have great customer service. And it's under promise and over deliver.
That's it.
And if you can do something in 2 days, tell them it'll be 3 days. And when you show up a day early, they're going to be tickled to death.
No
If
doubt.
something happens, you're running a day late, they'll still be happy because you did what you said you were going to do.
That's it. That is
You
it.
know, and it's about thinking about it from the customer's perspective. How do you feel when somebody doesn't do what they say? It aggravates me if they don't treat me right. It aggravates me.
No doubt.
And so I kind of have a philosophy for my service managers when I teach the course that there's a great song. Yeah, I'm sure you know the song, but it's by Tina Turner, and it's called Simply the Best.
Right.
And it's talking about something other than management, but there's a refrain in there that says simply the best, better than all the rest.
That's it. That's what you want to be.
Yeah, and what happens and we'll talk about the copy industry in a minute, but in any industry, what happens is you got people that will do it for cheaper than you will do it.
Right.
And if you want to keep your customers, you have to give them service that stands out, that's above and beyond what this other company is going to offer. And if you're the best in town, you don't have to be the cheapest. If you're not the best, then you got to fight on the downside looking for price.
That's it.
We can look at what's happened in the airline industry. You remember Southwest came out with $39 flights.
Right.
There's a bunch of airlines that used to fly that don't fly anymore.
That's it.
TWA, Continental, all these lines got absorbed because they couldn't compete, and they didn't understand how to do what Southwest was doing.
That's it.
And so that again, just an example. You can be cheap, and you can be a threat. But if you're the very best, there are people that don't want the cheapest. I use this as an example. Go up to any business and look for the boss's car there, and if it's a Yugo or something like that, a Chevette, then
Right.
he's a cheap guy.
Right.
He's going to care a lot about price. But if he's driving a really nice car, it shows that he cares about value.
That's it.
It's not about price, it's about value. So in the art of, and this is in any kind of management, I'm a firm believer in this. Part of it is always making sure that you build value into what you do. Do the extra thing, go a little bit farther. Now, a good example was on a copier. I'd have my technicians, when I was managing service, I'd have them take out the waste toner and empty it and put paper in all the drawers in the machine. That's not a technician's job, and then I would have them make sure they told the key operator what they did. Because then my sales team could say, hey, does your ask the guys that are off quoting you this price. Ask them if they'll put toner in your machine or change your waste toner all the time, and you'll put paper in the machine. Those kinds of things, because they're not going to do it.
Right.
See, now I made myself different.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what you have to do is differentiate yourself. In fact, are you familiar with the purple cow story?
Purple cow? No.
Uh-huh. Okay, this is I'll get the name wrong, but it's you can find it, research it, and you'll find it, and it'll be better than the way I tell it. But this gentleman was on a road trip with his family, and they stopped at a service station. They needed some gas and restroom, and so they did that. And they noticed everybody was over here alongside a fence with a bunch of cows in it, and everybody was standing there staring into this field. And they're like, "What's up?" So they had to go stare into it too.
Right.
No, seems reasonable. And out in the middle of that field, there was one purple cow. And, nobody was talking about all the other black and white cows out there.
Right.
They were talking about and thinking about this purple cow.
Right.
Now, if you were in the market for a purple cow, that guy could, and you wanted to buy his cow, nobody's going to undercut his price because he's got the only one. He's got the only one. So he can get what he wants for it.
That's it.
That same thing applies in any business is you make sure that you have an offer that nobody else can match. In the office equipment industry, typically the way they quote is the price of the copy and price of the copies. And if you quote something like that, guess what? Anybody can try to start to undercut you because they know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm a very firm believer in a billing program that's called flat rate, where you charge them a flat rate per month.
Right.
And it's for all the service you do for them. So if maybe you're doing a little IT work and maybe you got their water and their phone system, you just put it all into a bundle. Now, guess what?
They can't undercut you.
Yeah, they don't know.
That's
And probably
it.
nobody else is going to make that same offer.
That's
And
it.
it does a couple of things for the customer. And again, this is just part of the way I think about things. Is for the customer, they don't like meter reads, they don't like billing mistakes, and they don't like talking to salesmen. Put it on flat rate. It's an agreement that basically is unending. They can end it at any time, but unless they have a reason to want to end it, it just keeps renewing. So they don't have to see the salesperson. No meter reads. No billing mistakes. Just a flat rate every month, and they can budget it.
Right.
And if you're the only person in town that's offering something like that, you have a purple cow, and you can get full retail for that.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
awesome.
But it's about thinking about what you do, and even from a like I said, from a service perspective, from a senior manager in a company's perspective, you think about what is it we can do that will make us unique. And the other term for it is a USP, unique selling proposition.
Right.
You want to be different than everybody else, or otherwise you wind up in a price war. And the copier dealers are it's nuts how much of a price war they get into. And so a little bit about that industry, they have a challenge that they have a declining volume, even started before the pandemic with the transition to electronic records and all the things that are becoming more electronic. What happens is that revenue stream is starting to go down in the number of clicks.
Mhm.
And then because they're undercutting each other, the price per click is going down. And I always told my service managers that when you're selling no clicks for double O nothing, it is hard to pay people for it to work for you. It doesn't work so well. And again, so that goes back to, again, one of the things that I try to encourage them to do is to get out of the box. Don't think about, okay, we're service copiers. That's all we do. It's like, what else can we do? What are the other things that we can do? Could we work on paper shredders? Oh, probably we could do that. Could we handle telephones? Yeah, there's some neat programs to let you handle telephones.
Right.
IT, yep, there's some white label IT sources where you could start to bundle all of these things together, and you start to, again, you give your customers more reason to do business with you.
No doubt.
I'll use another term. I use this illustration with the copier managers, service managers, is I say, think about it. It's the difference between fishing with fly fishing with a barbless hook and catfishing with a great big hook with a treble hook on it.
Right.
So that you catch that fish on that fly rod, you better manage it perfectly or you're going to lose it.
That's it.
You hook that catfish in the mouth with 3 hooks, he's not going anywhere.
That's right.
He's going, the only place he's going is to the grease.
That's
It. And so it's, again, the more you can do for your customer and the more you can simplify their lives, it opens up some real opportunities. And so these are things when I'm working with a service manager one-on-one and doing coaching, I try to help them understand this, and I try to help them to look at, okay, how do we manage people? How do we get people to do what we want them to do?
That's right.
Well, there's got to be a reason they want to do that. There's got to be a carrot. And I'll get on my soapbox for a minute. Most companies, and I wasn't stuttering. That was repetition
Right,
for
right, right.
emphasis there. Um, they don't align what they want their employees to do with how they pay the employees. In
Nice.
the copier industry, I'll give you an example. I was standing there one day, and the service manager was talking to the owner about putting a bonus program in place. He says, "Why would I want to give technicians a bonus? I already pay them by the hour." And I wanted so badly to say, well, do you want them to stand there for 8 hours? Because that would be by the hour. Or do you want to go out and be really productive and take really good care of your customers?
Right.
So you need to align your compensation with what you want.
That's right.
I mean, hourly compensation is, I'll say the resource of a lazy person. Because it's easy, you just pay them by the hour.
Right.
But you really want to try to build programs that motivate them to do what you need them to do.
No.
Again, I'll go back to the copy industry. Sometimes people have bonus programs in place that are counterproductive because the way most compensation plans in the copier sales are structured is the sales guy gets a percentage of the revenue that's generated. And the bigger the machine he can get, the more revenue he can pack in there.
Mhm.
But what he'll do to do that is take money out of the service and put it into the sale price.
Mhm.
Okay. So the end result is he's hurt the company. He's hurt the most profitable part of the company. The only person he's helped himself, and well, he hadn't even helped the customer. Because putting a big machine in where a little machine works better is not even helpful to the customer.
Right. Right.
And again, it's just those kinds of things that you have to look at business, differently. You have to think about it differently. How can I get what we really want? And you look at it, start from there. What do I want my people to do? How can I measure that? How can I motivate them to want to do it? And it's not always about money. Excuse me, just one second.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because motivation can take a lot of forms. People today are motivated a lot by flexible work space.
Right.
That's a big motivating factor. That's You can look at the companies that have tried to force everybody back and the challenges they've had.
Right.
So if you got and even as a manager, if you got a little bit of flexibility, somebody does something good for you, meets a goal or exceeds a goal, give them a half a day off.
Right.
Because a half a day off doesn't cost you anything.
That's it.
You might lose a little tiny bit of productivity, but if it's a Friday afternoon or a Monday morning, you probably weren't going to get much that day anyway.
No
But
doubt.
think how much value that adds to a person that wanted to go somewhere for the weekend.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, and so it's you want to be not so into the box philosophically, I guess is what I'm saying.
No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. Let me ask you, with 22nd century management, what does a typical day look like for you, or well, not really a typical day, but what does a average day look for you, I would say.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm making a couple of pivots with my company. And,
Okay.
and again, it's one of those things that I looked around and I said, hey, there's some challenges here because the market that I was serving, I have probably, um, I don't want to say gotten all of the revenue that I could out of it, but it was
Hmm.
getting harder and harder to find students and companies willing to pay the price. So one of the things I decided to do is I'm going to transition that course to, a video on demand course.
Okay.
Because I think that gives them the ability to schedule it when they need it. Because if we're doing it live, it's got to be we got to set a time and do it that day every week.
Right.
So I'm transitioning down to the video on demand because I think it gives the customer more flexibility and I can price it a lot lower than because it doesn't require me being in a certain spot for 23 or 24 weeks.
Right.
And so that's a piece of it. And the other thing that I'm doing is that I started looking around. I've been since AI came out, I've been playing with AI, I should say.
I got you.
And I realized that there are things that I need in my life to make my day simpler,
All right.
and I started building them. So,
Okay.
for example, I have a voice receptionist that's AI, sounds like a human, talks like a human, asks questions like a human, and passes the information to the next agent or the next person that's going to talk to him. So you don't have to fill the person in again. It's like I just called a bank. I gave them all my information. They said transfer me to another agent, and I had to give
It's
him
home
all
again.
the same information.
That's it.
I'm like, how can this be? You Again, it's and that's a customer service thing. If you think about it, if you're not careful about it and you're doing that kind of stuff in your company, it is
You lose it.
irritating your customers all the time. But so I was like that, and then, well, I could really use an assistant. So I built an AI agent that's an executive assistant. So I can have her running on my computer and I can talk to her and tell her to schedule something or find me a phone number. And I don't have to stop and do those things.
So,
I'm like, so there's so many ways to utilize AI. And the end result of all of that was I realized that I had a product that had commercial value.
right.
And so I'm transitioning into doing that as well. I'm not giving up my coaching and consulting, but it's a really nice fit for 21st century management to offer state of the art virtual employees.
But
Yeah.
that is it.
Yeah.
That is it. Is that one of the major shifts that you are seeing in the industry right now, or do you know of any others other than the transition to a lot of AI help?
I, well, it was really interesting. I'll speak to that. I was at a conference in Scottsdale in February, and I thought I was doing something that was kind of unique. Nobody else was really doing it. And there was a gentleman that came on from one of the other major office equipment dealers in the U.S. And he was their like CIO, and he was saying that he was started doing something similar to what I'm doing. He's just using it internally, not selling it.
Right.
But he said that he realized that he could get rid of 80% of his staff.
Oof. Yeah.
And now he's not implementing all of those things right away. And this is what I would say to everybody is if you're thinking about employing AI, think about it as helping your existing people and eliminating the need to hire new people.
That's it. That's it.
Don't because if you explain it that way and you approach it that way and you act that way, your current employees will be fine with it because they'll like, my virtual receptionist works 24/7.
Right.
So that means the receptionist doesn't have to answer the phone every time it rings. She can deal with somebody that's there or do something that's more valuable.
That's it.
You
That's
know,
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And but I think AI is going to transform every business in ways that people don't even begin to understand. And it was interesting, kind of talking about AI a little bit, is too many times AI, what I see in AI is that people are, how do I want to say this? Are all in on AI. They want to get AI. But it's
Right.
like a carpenter that gets a brand new hammer and thinks he can use that hammer for everything. So he's trying to drive screws into the wood. And a hammer's not the tool. A
Right.
screwdriver's the tool.
Right.
And so that's the approach I took is I started looking at what can solve problems for people.
That's it.
And how can I make a tool that solves that problem? My AI receptionist, all she's good for is being a receptionist.
That's
She
it.
can make appointments, schedule appointments, add contacts to the CRM, do everything like a receptionist would do that doesn't require hands.
Yeah.
But she's not going to do anything else in the company for
She
you.
can make the coffee, Ken. She cannot make the
She
coffee.
can't make the coffee. Exactly. That requires hands. But she can't go out and be a salesperson.
That's it.
She can't manage be a dispatcher.
That's
Now
it.
I can build an agent that will be a dispatcher, but my receptionist is a receptionist.
That's it.
And you think about it, it goes back to the analogy of hiring. You don't hire somebody that can do everything in the company usually. You have a position that you need filled. You got a pain point. You find somebody that can take care of that pain point for you.
That's it. That's it. Let me
And
ask you about that, Ken. And what's working well for you right now with 22nd management consultant, and what's been frustrating, if anything?
well, the frustrating thing has been that I haven't been able to drag in as many live customers as I'd like to. My last class only had two people in it, and that's part of what made me think about, well, let's, maybe we need to redo this, revisit how I'm doing it, because again, everything changes. What worked well 5, 6, 7 years ago is different today.
Yeah.
The AI tool I think is going to work very well for me. I think the and one of the things going back again to, and this is something that a lot of people could think about in our space is, my course is on service management, but the first half of my course is just on management.
Right.
Doesn't have anything to do with copiers. It's just how to manage people.
Right.
So that's what I'll do is I build out this video course, then it'll become a multi-part course. So it'll be a video course for people that just want to learn about management, and maybe they're new managers, just gotten promoted or trying to get promoted to being a manager. And here's a course I can take that'll help me understand what's involved, and build some skills that I'll need. So that's a piece of it. Again, they'll have a full service manager's course, but I think I will shorten some of it down a little bit and make it a, service management for business owners. So
Right.
the dealer himself, because he came out of sales almost always, doesn't
Mhm.
really know anything about service. It's something he could take and learn about service.
Right.
And what I'm going to do is I will site license it, so if they buy the whole package, they have the manager's course, the owner's course, and the service manager's course, and they can use it as many times as they want with all their people.
No doubt. No
Yeah,
doubt.
because that way it becomes a really good value for them, and it's a revenue source for me.
No doubt. No doubt. All right. Last question. Um, well, it's kind of two part. Where do you want to be in the next 6 to 12 months? And if you had a magic wand to just fix one thing with your business, your core business, that might be slowing you down at all, what would that be?
Hmm. I'd clone me.
Right.
But
I can tell that. Not too many people have the enthusiasm for what you do like you do. So I love it.
yeah, and I get enthusiastic about it. But in 6 months, no, let's say a year
Hmm.
from now, I could very easily be a eight-figure business
Right.
because I have a unique marketing scheme. And this is just for businesses in general. Just me, I've got things to say.
Right.
Um, the first time I built my business, I went absolutely wrong about it. I didn't start with the end in mind. And that's one of the things I talk to my service managers all about too, is when you're planning, you always start with the end in mind. And as I worked on my project, started building products, I realized that I really had something that could be global, could be distributed globally. So
So,
I built the corporation that I built for it to be a global corporation, to be able to handle it globally. I set up the distribution structure. I set up all of my security requirements so I can meet anybody's privacy laws,
right.
anybody here, anywhere in the world. And I built an automated process so that as a primarily a one-man company, well, strictly a one-man company right now,
Right.
and the only time I see me adding somebody else is that as the cash flow gets where I can support it, I need somebody that can do what I do.
Yes, sir.
And because if I'm old, I could die. So
That's
it's not
any
good
of
for the
us.
shareholders, not good for my wife. So I need somebody that can step up and take over that role.
Right.
But almost all of my, and again, I'm going to be one of these people that doesn't hire many people because almost all of the roles in my company are going to be filled with AI agents. Most people go out and hire a marketing agency. I built one.
Right.
A lot of people hire directors for their board. I just built a board of directors.
Right.
And so you start to do those kinds of things. You find the tools. And one more regression, and then I'll let you ask the rest of the question. Um, there was a long time back, there was an economist, and he talked about that before World War II, that the definition of richness or of rich depended on the resources that a person owned.
Hmm.
And it applied to a country, a person, a company, any of those things. But
Right.
he said that after World War II, and it started with the Japanese,
Mhm.
is what happened is that it changed to the amount of resources you have leveraged by the technology you use was what defined riches. Because you think about Japan coming out of World War II, they're extremely poor.
Right.
They don't have any real natural resources. But what did they do? They became an economic powerhouse.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with it's like with me with AI. Anybody that starts to leverage technology is going to multiply their ability to generate wealth.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, you just said a mouthful right there, Ken, and I really appreciate all of your insights. And you just encouraged me to know that I'm on the right track with my business. So, and more than that, your insights are are awesome in the fact that everybody that we come across can learn from your experiences and your insights. So I really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate this conversation. Thanks a lot, Ken.
Thank you. It was fun being here, Dave.